Anytime? Anytime. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. I have a microphone, or I could use my, when I used to teach 9th grade English voice. Can you all hear that? If you say we're going to do one act, the first act, Romeo and Juliet. Oh, no. Different time. Listen, I want to be very brief. I want to welcome you all to our magnificent college here. I want to recognize one of my many bosses, my department chair and my dean. It seems like I work for all of you, and I'm happy to do it. What a wonderful turnout for this Vital Voices series. And we have some magnificent speakers, state-elected representatives that are leaders in education and finance and higher ed, as well as representatives from the TEA, as well as the Mayor's Liaison for Educational Initiatives. And so you have some of the most important vital voices for public education locally and at the state here to talk to you at UH Downtown, where we believe that the D stands for difference. Yes? I'm working on it. We're at downtown, the second largest university in the largest city in the state, but nothing is more important than you all being here today and giving us an opportunity to help inform you to be critical agents of education policy, and more importantly, thoughtful and engaged citizens. This is what we hope to do at the University of Houston Downtown, and I want to congratulate Steve and the dean and the college for putting together this magnificent series, okay, where we help to bring vital voices to your attention. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Villano. Thank you all for being here.
Are you going to heckle?
No.
Please heckle. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Dr. Munoz. We are thrilled to be able to have this panel with us, and we are even more thrilled that you guys are able to come and join us for tonight. I don't like doing prepared remarks, but their accomplishments and their bios are just too much for me to be able to read it off the top of my head. Each person on this panel has done wonderful things, both individually and for the public good. And so I don't want to mess anything up, so excuse me, but I'm going to read from my prepared remarks. Okay? To my right here is A.J. Craybill. Mr. Craybill is the Deputy TA Commissioner for Governance, and he was raised in and out of foster care from birth until high school. A.J. bounced around enough to have attended 11 schools prior to graduation. He attended urban, suburban, rural, private, public, and parochial schools, lived with white families, families of color, lived in racist communities, and inclusive communities, experienced loving homes and homelessness. Guided by the idea that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change, and drawing on his intimate familiarity with the triumphs and terrors of America's safety nets for children, he has devoted much of his adult life to advocating for the well-being of our nation's most vulnerable youth. A.J. currently serves as the Texas Education Agency's Deputy Commissioner for Governance. In this position, some of Mr. Craybill's responsibilities include focusing on school improvement, providing governance to administration, supporting and innovating school systems, and school safety and discipline. In terms of governance, Mr. Craybill develops and facilitates leadership training sessions to educate current and potential school administrators and school board members on how to better execute the responsibility their positions entail. Also, if a district is underperforming, Mr. Craybill will often require administrators and board members to undergo training to adjust their plans to improve their respective districts. And, believe it or not,
Here it is.
this, I can't even lift it. This is how Mr. Craybill arrived here today. Okay? So,
we'll have to do a demonstration.
he will have to do a demonstration, yes.
Come to the Capitol, you can see him zip through the driveway.
So I was freaking out, like, where is he? Where is he? And then there he rolled in, as it was. So there you go. So please give a round, a hearty welcome to to my left is Juliet Stepech. Ms. Stepech was born and raised in Houston, Texas. Ms. Stepech, yeah, let's get a round of applause there. Ms. Stepech grew up in the east end of Houston, the daughter of immigrant parents from Argentina and Mexico. She graduated valedictorian of the High School for Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice and earned an academic scholarship to Rice University, where she graduated in 1996 with a Bachelor of Arts magna cum laude in Political Science, Policy Studies, and Religious Studies. She was awarded the Joseph Cooper Prize as the most outstanding policy student in her graduating class. After graduating, she spent the summer as an adult advisor for the YMCA's International Exchange Program to Kyoto, Japan, and participated in the Hiroshima Peace Conference. Juliet received her law degree from the University of Texas School of Law and is very proud to be the first attorney in her family. She is a civil litigator and certified mediator, and has courtroom, trial, and appellate experience in numerous counties throughout the state of Texas. She was admitted to the Texas State Bar in November of '99. Prior to her work with the mayor as the Director of Education, Juliet was elected to the Houston Independent School District's Board of Education as a trustee of District 8 in a special election. Later in 2010. Later in 2011, Juliet was re-elected to serve a full 4-year term. She served as chairperson of HISD's Audit Committee for 3 years and pushed for administrative and educational reform and was elected by her peers to serve as the Board of Education's president in 2014. On February 1st, 2016, Mayor Sylvester Turner selected Juliet to serve as the Director of Education, a new position with the mayor's administration. Juliet passionately believes, and if anyone talks to her for 5 seconds, you know that everything Juliet does is with passion. She passionately believes, where's my line here? Okay, that public education is a human right, is the great social equalizer, and is the foundation for a prosperous community. She's excited to collaborate with educational institutions across the city and community partners to build relationships that are lasting and promote educational opportunity and excellence in our great city of Houston. Juliet is currently involved in the Community Conversations listening tour that the Mental Health of America is hosting in conjunction with UNICEF and the City Council. Community Conversations is an 11-week event where city district residents and city council members open a dialogue about post-Harvey trauma, how trauma has affected their children and their community, and what steps we can begin to take to move forward into long-term recovery for each community. So please join me in giving a huge round of applause. So now to my left here is our great state senator, Kel Seliger. And Mr. Seliger was first elected to the Texas Senate in 2004. Senate District 31, which he represents, spans 37 counties, from the Panhandle to the Permian Basin, and includes Amarillo, Midland, Odessa, and Big Spring. Mr. Seliger was born in Amarillo and raised in Borger. Senator Seliger is a graduate of Borger Public Schools and Dartmouth College. He spent 35 years in the steel industry. Senator Seliger currently serves as chairman of the Senate Higher Education Committee and is a member of the Senate Education Committee, Select Finance Committee, and Select Committee on Natural Resources and Economic Development. The senator has been recognized by many groups for his conservative principles, as well as his dedication to small government and local control. Seliger is privileged to be the recipient of the Texas Municipal League Legislator of the Year Award, Texas Conservative Coalition's Conservative Champion Award, Texas Wildlife Association's Conservation Hero Award, and the Texas Parent Teacher Association's Legislative Honor Roll. Most recently, he was awarded the Humanities Texas Leader in Education Award and named Senate Legislator of the Year by the Texas Nurse Practitioners. During the recent 85th legislative session As chairman of the Senate Higher Education Committee, Senator Seliger secured an additional $1.7 million in funding for the University of Texas of the Permian Basin College of Engineering, which will be used to expand the chemical and electrical engineering programs. Additionally, $4.2 million is provided to UTPB as a hold harmless to ensure the school does not lose more than 10% of its state funding. Senator Seliger also succeeded in securing $4.17 million for Texas Tech University's future veterinary medical school. As part of his continued service on the education community, the senator authored Senate Bill 463, a bill that extends the option of individual graduation committees for students who passed all of their courses but failed to pass up to 2 state-mandated tests. Chairman Seliger and Representative John Smithy passed Senate Bill 654, which will help improve access to health care in rural and medically underserved parts of Texas. Prior to his election to the Senate, Senator Seliger served 4 terms as mayor of Amarillo and as a member of the Amarillo City Commission and the Amarillo Civil Service Commission. He and his wife Nancy reside in Amarillo and have 2 sons, Jonathan and Matthew. Please welcome Senator Kel Seliger. And last, but by no question about it, certainly not least.
Don't put my class rank in there. We've already
Yeah, we can't all be valedictorian.
I didn't know they were keeping track.
Right.
I won't say where your
I just
position was.
forgot to do that. We were back to the GPAs.
Okay, I won't do that. Senator Taylor, Larry Taylor, is a lifelong Texan and Baylor University graduate, raised in Friendswood. He and his wife Carrie have 3 adult children and 2 grandchildren. Senator Taylor owns Truman Taylor Insurance in Friendswood, an independent agency started by his father more than 50 years ago. The agency recently merged with the Galveston Insurance Agency. Before his election to the Senate in 2012, Senator Taylor served 5 terms in the House of Representatives. Currently, Senator Taylor serves as the chairman of the Senate Committee on Education and as a member of the Senate Finance, Business, Commerce, and Higher Education Committees. In 2017, Senator Taylor was appointed to the Texas Commission on Public School Finance, which will explore ways to update and improve how Texas funds its schools. He also co-chairs the Joint Interim Committee to study a coastal barrier system, which aims to identify methods of storm protection along the Texas Gulf Coast, and is a member of the Legislative Budget Board, a permanent joint commission responsible for developing budget and policy recommendations for legislative appropriations. Senator Taylor was also named chair of a Senate Select Committee to study school violence in June, following the tragedy at Santa Fe High School. Senator Taylor is the recipient of the Bay Area Houston Economic Partnership's 2017 Quasar Award, which recognizes an outstanding leader who demonstrates a strong and continual effort to support the business foundations of the greater Bay Area Houston communities. He serves on the board of Hope Village, a residential and day program for people with developmental and disabilities, and as the director and chairman of the board for the Houston-based Texan Bank. He is also president of the Texas Conservative Research Institute. Senator Taylor represents Senate District 11, comprised of portions of Brazoria, Galveston, and Harris counties. Please welcome Senator Larry Taylor. Okay, so enough with the script. So this is what I'd like to do. I would like to have each of the people on our panel to tell you, spend about 10 minutes to tell you what they believe their top issues are that are facing Texas public education. After each person speaks, I'll open up the floor to some questions for that direct person. So you don't have to wait to the end if you have a question for an individual. So, and then we have questions that were submitted to me about what some of your concerns are for the top issues in education. So I will read some of those questions, and how many of you that are in this room submitted questions to the address on the email? One person? Couple? Two? Three? 4, 5, 6? Okay. So I'll call on you if you have. I have your comments in here, and I also have some late comments, so we'll try to get all questions answered. I want this to be as interactive as possible. So we will start. Let's start with Senator Taylor, if you want. Okay?
Hello and good evening. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of this panel and for the opportunity to visit with you. We have folks working in social services, education, what all we've got here. We've got a number of different folks here. And what we're doing in the state of Texas is trying to move our state forward. You know, we're behind in a lot of areas. Our population has changed dramatically, and education has to meet those challenges. One of the things I've been working on since I've been the chairman of the Education Committee, I was on it for one session in 2015 and became chairman in 17 and 19. And what we've been working on since that time I've been there, one is training up our workforce. You know, we kind of had to switch gears. A lot of people thought we're training everyone to go to a four-year university. But that's not what everyone's going to do. There's a lot of great careers that we need, but they require some kind of post-secondary, whether it's an associate's degree or certification. So we've kind of made that switch to giving people options in school. Of course, a lot of these kids, if they were never going to a four-year university and they weren't interested in what we were doing, what we call them dropouts. Well, obviously, that's not good. So we try to make sure we have opportunities for all of our students. We're coming in that transition. We're well into it, but particularly in this area. Industry has joined in, community colleges have joined in. You're seeing it. And we have career tech buildings being built by our public schools as well as our community colleges. So we're reaching that. But a lot of it in the bigger picture is just moving education in the 21st century. You know, the idea of having kids sit in rows facing a teacher giving a lecture is kind of the way we used to do it a long time ago. And unfortunately, we're still doing that in a lot of cases. But that's not the way these kids are coming prepared or coming ready for school. And frankly, that's not the same skills we need for our 21st century workforce. And you know, if you look at what's around now, the industries that are out there today, and what people are doing, some of these industries weren't around here 10 years ago. And frankly, the kids that you'll be working with and you and yourselves, we're going to have industries we've never even heard of. So we can't train people on a particular skill other than the skill of learning how to learn. Because what's going to happen from this point on is we're going to all have to continue to learn the new things. We're going to keep up. We've got to have those skills. And we'll be able to work together in groups. That's what we hear a lot from the workforce. We're not creating assembly line workers anymore. That's the past. So we've got to train people to think creatively, problem solving. You know, the last thing you need on an assembly line is creativity, right? Talk about messing things up. So, but in this new 21st century, that's exactly what we need. And we need people coming up with innovative things and fixes and all that. So we're trying to transition from the old to the new, and a lot of that's how do we get our educational system to change. There's always inertia. People kind of resist change. But we're seeing a lot of things out there that are really working. So we're promoting those things. We'll probably talk about some of that a little later. Blended learning, self-paced learning, you know, those types of things, using technology. I mean, frankly, to have an educational system today where you want people to recite facts and figures and years, also, hey Siri, when did, I mean, so it's kind of like, I kind of relate to when we had this whole question about whether or not to use calculators in math tests. Really? I mean, the calculators, that's what they're going to be using the rest of their life. I think you need to teach them where the questions are enough, even when they use a calculator, they got to understand what they're doing. Same thing to teach kids as if there is no internet, really. I don't think we're going back to not having an internet. So the test should be reflective of how do I look into it and get more nuanced into it and get deeper in the subject rather than just reciting facts. Because those are at your fingertips. I mean, Siri could probably give this speech for me if I asked her. And that's where we're moving. Oh, look at it. Go ahead, I'm listening. Siri, hush. Okay, I'm sorry. That's so true. She's trying to get my speech right now. Things coming up this session. I've been on Public School Finance Commission that started in January this year. Our school finance, much of it is 40, 30, 25 years old. Once again, what does the world look like today versus what it looked like 30 and 25, even 10 years ago? I know you are, Siri. You can hush. She's trying to interrupt now. I won't say that anymore, S-I-R-I. I won't say that. But the Public School Finance Commission, we've also got to bring our finance system in the 21st century. And we've had some great work. This is a very diverse commission, from educators to superintendents to legislators to business people. employers. We've just got a whole gamut of people on there. And we've come up with some very good consensus things out of that very diverse group of things we'll be working on this session to try to bring us into the 21st century. And frankly, our finance system needs to reflect the different demographics that we face in our state today. How many of you are aware that our largest demographic now in our school district, our students, is lower income, qualifying for free and reduced lunch? It's not just largest, it's 60% of our student body. And it's also our fastest growing demographic. So you see the importance of educating those students. We can't afford to let those kids, well, they're just not going to do as well. They come from a low income background. That's not acceptable. And we have schools that are doing it. They're teaching those students. I'll give you a real quick example. I didn't start my time on my 10 minutes. Dallas ISD has an ACE program. Dallas ISD is very large, but they've had schools that have been failing for numerous years. Blanton Elementary is a perfect example. They were at a passing rate of about 50%. 50% of their students historically had passed tests. 50%. They came with a program. They identified their best teachers and principals. They paid them more money, and they sent them to more challenging schools. Blanton Elementary in 1 year went from 50% passing to 80%. Within 2 years, they were passing Highland Park ISD. It was one of the highest school districts in the state of Texas. That's a low-income area that can do it. I believe that talent and abilities are spread evenly throughout every ethnic, every socioeconomic group. They're all out there. We just got to give them the opportunities and address the needs that they have. So we're working on those types of things. We'll be doing a lot of that. The School Finance Commission, very difficult. The reason our formulas are 40, 30, 25 years old is because it's very, very difficult to pass. Everything we do with school finance, if you fix one thing, it messes up 3 other things. And guess who we hear from in the legislature? Not the people who benefited. They never come and say, wow, that was great. All we hear from is the people who said, hey, we lost money on this and this and this. So we're trying to come up with a fair system that we can all agree is a fair way to do it and try to transition to that new system that everybody understands and agrees is the best way to go. Right now we have districts paying consultants to tell them how much money they're going to get from the state. That's unacceptable. It shouldn't be that complicated. They should be able to calculate that on their own. I had one more thing, school safety, I'm sorry. Something came up, obviously, unexpectedly in my district, Santa Fe. And, I always talk about education is the most important thing we do in the legislature, just behind safety. Because if you're not safe, it doesn't matter about the rest of it. In particular, when you talk about education, our students need to be safe, they need to feel safe, or they're not going to be able to get that education that they need. That's a new thing that's kind of come up in recent years. We've had schools focusing on it somewhat, but now that it's happened right here in Santa Fe, right behind Parkland, there's a lot of intense things going on. And once again, we had another select committee on that I was chairing, and we came up with, once again, a very diverse group, but we came up with some consensus items. The best thing you can do for school safety is prevention. Once the shooting or whatever violence starts, there's nothing good that happens after that. So the best thing you do is prevention. And so we need more mental health intervention counselors in our campuses. If you can identify these students who are having trouble with, as they're first getting off the path, where things are starting, if you get to them then, you can bring them back. But if they get too far down the road, then we see outbursts and outbreaks of violence like we've seen. So the best thing we do is intervention counselors. The second thing is, if we are going to have those types of it, we need to be prepared for them. And that's more school safety resource officers, whether it's a school district police department, or they contract with a local law enforcement, or they have a marshal program in other parts of the state. We have to get people there responding very quickly. We've been told during this commission process that on average in a school shooting there's an average of 8 to 10 murder attempts per minute. Let that sink in, 8 to 10 per minute. So every minute you're talking about 8 to 10 lives. In Santa Fe was 3 minutes. And they had 10 killed and 16 wounded. So it's right there in that average of 8 to 10 per minute. So we have to have people there able to respond quickly when we do have it. The best thing is prevention. So we'll be working on school safety, and I'm probably well over my 10 minutes I have intended to do that, and I apologize. But I have a passion for what we're doing in education. We have to do better. The world is improving at this rate, and we're improving at this rate. And we can't afford to fall further behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. One of the questions that was sent in to me was, how can we keep students safe without interfering with the learning process?
Oh, I think you can do that. And part of it is having resource officers around that students get familiar with, they know them. It's not like an oppressive presence that there are law enforcement around on campus. We've had, in some smaller towns, they're talking about putting like one of their substations on a campus, just so there are police there interacting, and then you have the school resource officers. They're not necessarily street cops, because there's a different deal. If you're out working on the street, you have a little different demeanor, because you probably develop it, some of the people you're dealing with. You're not typically dealing with the people that are doing the best, or you're seeing them at their worst time. That's not what you want having interact with students necessarily, but having people that are trained as school resource officers, having the counseling. And I'll just tell you this, after 9/11, many of you are probably too young to remember what happened after 9/11, but our world changed. Our mindset changed. Before 9/11, if your plane got hijacked, which used to happen, everyone was trained just to stay in your seat. We'll go wherever the hijacker takes us. They'll finally get out and we'll move on. But after 9/11, nobody's sitting in their seat for anything. Somebody acts like they're threatening the plane, they get the tar beat out of them. That's a post-9/11 mindset. For our students and for our schools and our faculty, it's a different mindset. It's a different day. Now they're looking. And frankly, if students hear one other student say something, they're reporting it, and they need to. Just talking to Texas City today, they've had like 4 arrests in the last week for kids making threats. No longer can you make these threats. They're not funny, ha-ha. People are taking it very seriously. So the idea is, you fortify some of it. It doesn't look like a fort. It doesn't look like a prison. If you have some secure access, you're going to see a lot of technology. I was surprised how much technology is already in some of these schools that I was not aware of. The cameras and those types of things, the different kind of tones and alarms, and they don't necessarily just have bells going off. Now they can actually come on and make announcements. They have code words that they say that teachers know. So there's a lot of things going on to make sure these kids are safe in our campuses. But a lot of it's people having a different mindset. But I think the students will be fine. It's a shock, and I think it's important that we still remember, because I hear a lot of kids saying they're afraid to go to school and they're afraid of this. This is still a very rare thing that happens. I think we need to keep that in mind. We don't overreact, that we get paranoid. And I think it's important for students to understand that. When you hear that, you need to encourage that that's not happening every day. In fact, it's almost NPR. Did a study on that, and they were over-reporting the number of school shootings. I think they had verified like 12 over a period of time. There have been like several hundred reported. So we need to understand that it's a serious problem, but it's not as frequent as people have been kind of gotten that mindset. So I think reality is very important in that too, to make sure our kids feel safe.
Does anyone have a question for Senator Chambers? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, since we're taping this, I want to make sure that we get your comments.
Oh, I didn't know we were taping that.
Greetings.
The next question's for Kel.
Greetings. My name is damonBARONE, and I have a question about financing in the school funding. Currently, the district that I live in, 85% of their budget is allocated towards administrative staff, and it's a small population of administrative staff. They have directors of directors of directors, and they, in my opinion, abuse our tax money. So what is the recourse that me as a taxpayer has to get the district aligned to put some of those fundings towards education? For example, we have 6 schools and improvement required, and they're all strategically, well, I say strategically, they're all obviously in one regional location of our district. So that bothers me a lot. So they like to say that we have a budget problem, but we have actually a spending problem. So how do we correct that?
And that is a big part of the issue that we're having. You're a part of an independent school district, right?
Alief ISD, if you must.
Alief ISD, independent school district. So we give a lot of local control. So those spending decisions on administration, a lot of that is totally up to that district. So who has control over that? Anyone?
Superintendent.
Voters.
The board.
The school board.
And how does the board member get on the board? An election. How many people vote in those elections?
Very few.
The percentage is very small. When you do vote, you're a very powerful voter. Everybody wants power as a voter. If you vote, you're voting for like 100 people. In a school board, like you maybe vote for 1,000 people. So you show great power when you show up and vote, knowing those issues. Second thing, from the state level, we want local control until the point where they're not doing a good job. So we've done a couple things. One, we just came up with an A through F to help people have a better idea of what's going on in their local, either their campus or their district.
Right.
So what's happened in some of these larger districts, they have a lot of campuses, and they keep their overall rating up, but there are certain campuses that have been failing for years. Houston ISD has some that have been failing for 10 years, a decade. So 2 things we've done. One, your whole district is now being held accountable for those poorly performing campuses. So HISD is here. They had like 14 before. We passed this law that you're going to take over your whole district if you don't get it fixed. They're down to 4. And Harvey give them another year to get that fixed, and hopefully they'll get it done within this next year. But some of these have been on there for 10 years. Once again, public education career is 12 years. And you're going to schools that's been failing for 10 years. That's your whole public school career. You are sending off those kids to a very dismal future because they've not gotten the education that they deserve. So we are trying to do that. The second thing, we've sped up the process of moving in on some of these campuses. So it used to be like 7, 8 years. And there was a big debate, like, really? You want to defend letting a poor performing school keep going for 7, 8 years? We sped up like 3 years. And we actually have to kick in a plan. In the first year, the TA has to approve that, and then they go into the second year and it's still not working. We start bringing in board of managers, which is really local people. But they're professional people that have some insights and those kind of things. So we've done what we can along those lines. But let me just try you real quick on A through F. I got to say, because there's a lot of discussion about A through F, a lot of pushback. Here's the shocking thing. The old system we had, it was improvement required, which you referred to, and met standard. Do you know what improvement required was? It was the 7th percentile and below. That's who needed improvement. So if you were in the 8%, you met standard. Whose standard is that? Right. When I tell you that we have such a 36% of our students qualify based on SAT and ACT for college or ready for college, that's not a good standard. A through F, I think we all understand A through F, right? And here's the deal. If you're in the 8th percentile and you're getting the same rating as somebody in the 99th percentile, who knows the difference? If you're a parent of a child on that campus, you hear you met standard, you say, well, we're doing okay. But the story is an A through F. If you're a C, we know exactly what we need to do to get to a B. And I'm already hearing these conversations. We came out of the ratings for districts, and they're already having those conversations. What do we need to do to get a B? Or if we're a B, what does it take to get an A? So they're already, that's going to be a process of continuous improvement. Even if you got an A, you may have scored not as well in some other categories. You know exactly what you need to improve on. Right. So the goal is to get everybody from A through F right now is a bell curve. Move them over to A's. And I'll tell you one thing real quick. One thing we heard a lot, A through F is just going to measure zip codes. Students don't have a choice. Schools don't have a choice who their students are, it's just who lives around there, right? What happened was, A through F, 15% of our high percentage low-income student population schools got an A. Got an A. So that shows you it can be done. So all these other schools going, well, our kids are poor, they don't come from a good background. I don't want to hear any more excuses. A lot of that's lowered expectations. And it's time to improve our expectations for everybody and get them all up to speed.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taylor. I'm going to turn the microphone over to contesting Juliet Stepetch. And Juliet, you can tell us, take about 5 to 7 minutes and tell us about what you think, in your mind, from your perspective, are the top issues facing Texas public education, especially from the city of Houston HISD stand.
Is that because Larry took a bunch of her time?
Yeah, you're going to have 2 minutes.
Turn mine off.
That's all I get.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's such a pleasure to be on this panel and to be able to spend some time with you. I am having a hard time sitting down because I can't see everyone in the audience, and I'm short in and of itself. But first and foremost, it's like just starting in this journey in public education, looking at the opportunities that present. There's such tremendous challenges, and yet this is also such a beacon of hope in terms of a cornerstone of our democracy, the entire ability to look at whether a city is going to be prosperous or not. One of the greatest indices to look at is the education level of a population. Houston is often touted and described as the most diverse city in the country. And I recently had an opportunity to meet with Dr. Lindsay from NYU, who said, Juliet, Houston is the second most prosperous city in the country. Now, I don't know who's number 1. I don't know, maybe it's New York. I was really surprised by that
Most
statistic.
prosperous or
We are second most prosperous in the country. I was really surprised to hear that. But then we're 64th when it comes to income equality, right? So you oftentimes hear Mayor Sylvester Turner say, I don't want to be a mayor of haves and have-nots. And I remember when I was a school board member, going and visiting the schools. There was a school named Fur High School in the East End, and the students made a beautiful video, and it was called The Other Side of Town. And they said, why is it that our side of town is lacking the resources that we see that are so ready available on the other side of town?
That's right.
Don't we deserve to have those same opportunities as well? And so, I tell folks I started on the school board thinking that I was an informed, engaged Houstonian. I'm a native Houstonian. I've lived here my whole life. I've had the opportunity to serve as a mentor and a volunteer at local high schools. And then I serve on the school board, and I thought I was going to be able to help good schools become better, help children follow their passions and dreams. And my goodness, was I wearing rose-colored lenses. Well, first of all, how many people in here even know what a school board trustee does? All right, we only have a handful of people, right? And so very few people know what a school board trustee does. And very few people vote for the school board trustee. Or I should say this, very few people make an informed decision when they go to the bottom of the ballot and they vote for that school board member. And oftentimes they may look and they say, which name sounds nicest? Or who in the world, did my family member tell me to vote for? Right? And so I remember when I first started rooting for the school board, I said, Julia, do you know what a school board member does? No, I don't. Right? And yet it's one of the most critical, valuable, quasi-governmental institutions that exists within the city of Houston. Yes. How many ISDs are in the city of Houston? A lot. I like that. Very good, General. That's good. You get a gold star. How many school districts are in the city of Houston's boundaries?
33?
33.
17.
Oh my goodness, you get a gold star. Someone give her an extra piece of pizza. So there are 17 independent school districts in the city of Houston. If you look at that, that's a pipeline of about 903,000 kids, right? And then you have charters. And the number, I think it's 37 or 42 charters that are in the area, and they have private schools. And then you also have approximately 3,000 early childhood centers. And then I'm not counting post-secondary. Post-secondary in terms of the institution that we're here today, University of Houston Downtown, University of Houston, St. Thomas, Rice University, Texas Southern University, HCC, San Jack. My goodness, sometimes when I miss a school, people come back later, oh, you forgot my school. So I will just say all of these beautiful institutions of post-secondary, K through 12, early childhood, private, charter, all of those that exist in this space. The question is then, what are the challenges? We have a dramatically changing demographic. Many of us have heard Professor Kleinberg describe the Houston area survey many, many years and talks about how there is such an importance for the young people. The young people who are predominantly becoming more and more students of color. African American, Latino, Asian children. Young people that are going to be 18 when this community celebrates its 200th anniversary in 2036, right? And so are we going to be able to be a city of the future if we do not ensure that every child throughout the city is going to be able to succeed? To have access to a rigorous, welcoming, inclusive, responsive, comprehensive high school that exists in this city, especially in their own neighborhood. And also, I will ask the students here that are experiencing post-secondary readiness, how many young people here have had an opportunity to connect to Houston's dynamic economy via an internship opportunity? Right? So, raise those hands again.
I saw two very right.
Right? So we've got some folks that are like, maybe I was in an internship. I think I was in an internship, and I am in an internship. Every single young person, it's so critical for you to be able to connect to the local economy that exists in this dynamic city of Houston. Why? Why is that important? Well, one, it's important to make some money, right? But the money doesn't really matter. What matters is that you make connections to adults that can help you and that can provide you with guidance and good, credible, responsible advice about your future. That's, an area in which we really need to work on developing. How can we better facilitate connecting young people to job opportunities, internship, apprenticeship programs, so that way while you're studying, you're earning and learning, and you can also make a conscientious effort if you've chosen the right major. Right? We now have laws that require young people at the age of 8, when they're in 8th grade, to start picking their endorsements, which I think is great, to be able to start looking at future options and looking at different classes that you're going to take. But you should have empowered family members and students and folks in the school community, counselors, teachers, and other persons that can provide strong guidance to answer the questions that the families and the children may have, so that way they can make informed choices. I tell folks, I graduated in 1992. That was a long time ago. Many people in this room that are in school, you weren't even born, right? Right? Oh my gosh, that's true. You weren't even born. I was hoping that wasn't true, but it's true. You weren't even born. And so the thing is, it's like, I often tell folks that I feel so blessed to have had a world-class education. But oftentimes I felt that it was good luck in many instances. It was that fantastic person that took time to answer my questions. It was that teacher or that professor that told me about the internship. It was that individual that told me that I had to fill out a FAFSA form to be able to get financial aid. It was that opportunity to say, what in the world is in that office and why is everyone going in there? So it's asking those questions that are critical and key. And so what I say is like, the world is dramatically changing. We continue to function in a way in which we are responsive to the design of what existed probably when I was a student. In order for us to meet and accomplish what we want to do, which is empowering every single student in this room, we must be transformative and innovative in designing school systems that are responsive to the unique needs of communities as they exist at present. And it also requires us to be able to differentiate and use a strong methodology of being economical and efficient and targeted in the way we are allocating our resources, so we're not wasting dollars and money on things that we don't necessarily need, but so that we are making sure that we're focusing on designing plans that meet your needs of what's happening now, not what happened when I was in school, right? Because you can benefit a little bit from what I can tell you, but boy, you can benefit a whole lot more if you have someone that actually knows what the industries are that require the skill set that you're trying to develop right here, right now. And so I say that another thing that we really have to work on is breaking down the silos and making sure that the early childhood time frame, the K through 12 system, and the post-secondary have communication amongst each other. And God bless the different agencies at the state coming up with a tri-agency report and also the 60 by 30 plan. I strongly encourage folks, if you do not know what that is, look it up. It's very interesting. It talks about how we want the state of Texas to be empowered with at least some level of post-secondary skills and training, at least 60% of the population having some type of post-secondary readiness by 2030. And so the thing is, that that's going to require us to work together in very new and creative ways. That's going to require people to say, hey, guess what? Maybe you're going to have to be uncomfortable and give up some of your power. Maybe you're going to have to feel uncomfortable and ask some questions. So that way we can start working together and sharing the resources working with this, everything and every type of asset that we have here. Remember, second most prosperous city in the country. We've got largest medical center in the world. We've got tremendous universities. We've got 17 school districts all over the place. We've got many early childhood centers. But how can we strategically come up with a vision and a plan as a community to ensure that we're designing something that is especially going to take in mind the most vulnerable children, families, and communities, so that way they are empowered to succeed in today's economy?
We have a question back here.
Hi, my name's Rose Street, and this question is for Juliet. How do you empower people in your capacity as Director of Education? And also, can you share some projects that you're working on with us?
Yes, thank you for that question. I also tell folks it's like a gold star for asking a question. That's one thing that I often tell folks. It's like when you're in an audience, make sure to ask questions. It's really important. So at the City of Houston, one thing that I've been able to do is I've just had the blessing of being able to meet with so many different organizations that exist in the City of Houston. You will hear, I have a dear friend named Adib Arkawi who says, we are a city that's very program rich, but system poor. We've got programs all over the city. And I tell folks I thought that at one point, within 1 year's time, I'd be finished meeting with folks. I still have meetings to this day, and people call me and they're like, can I tell you about the program that we're running? Can I talk to you a little bit about what we're trying to do to help this community? And trying to just keep a laundry list of all of these different activities. And people that want to come and help campuses and schools and communities, it's tremendous. This especially became even more apparent during Hurricane Harvey, right? So on a general scale, some large citywide programs that we've been working on. One, there's Mayor's Hire Houston Youth Program. It's a program in which we are attempting to have 16 to 24-year-olds connect to jobs at the City of Houston, or in a nonprofit, or in a local company, and we will get sponsorship dollars to allow for youth to work at nonprofits in case nonprofits cannot pay the youth. We want to make sure that all the positions are paid for. It opens in the summer. I strongly encourage young people to visit the website. It's www.hirehoustonyouth.org. We also have another citywide initiative, which is a collaboration with the Houston Endowment, the United Way, Harris County Department of Education, and the City of Houston, in which it's called Out to Learn. And you can go and look at the website, www.out2learn.org. And that will provide you with a database of out-of-school, after-school programs that exist in the City of Houston, just in case you're interested in learning or sharing with your loved ones, your brothers and sisters, your nieces, you can have an opportunity. It's geographically located as well. And I'm really proud to say we won a national award for that website. So, but it's the first website of its kind in Houston. Dallas had the first one for 10 years. We learned a lot from Dallas's, but Houston's got the national award. So I strongly encourage you to take a look at that website. And then, in terms of post-Hurricane Harvey, we have been working with Texas Children's Hospital, the Harris Health System, the Collaborative for School Behavioral Health, UNICEF, and other partners to take a strong look at psychosocial, emotional supports, training the trainers, assisting folks post-Harvey, especially since many of the issues of stress and trauma do not just go away within the first year. In fact, many of it come to the fruition and become even stronger 3-4 years out. And so we are currently hosting a meeting at all the different council member districts throughout the City of Houston to gather information from community members about what we can do to better serve. So those are just some small examples. In terms of Hurricane Harvey, we did a lot of just different types of activities to try to bring supplies, resources, and supports to communities in need. We worked with UNICEF during that to make sure that we prioritize allocation to those that were hardest hit by the storm. And I will tell folks that during that time frame, it was as if I received a graduate level course in working with others and trying to develop a post-disaster intervention plan. And some of the initiatives and programs that we designed were actually then taken and used in Puerto Rico. So just know that the things that we do here in town, your wisdom, your interests, your concern, what you have done in this space is taken note and it's serving as a guide in other areas around the world. So I want to say thank you for everyone here, because every Houstonian I know worked very, very hard in making sure that this city was able to recover and continues to recover after Hurricane.
Thank you, Juliet. Okay, so I would imagine that some of you have more questions that you want to ask, but we're gonna hear from Senator Seliger, and then Mr. Craybill, and then at the end we'll have time for more questions. So, Senator?
Thank you very much. Please allow me to stand. I've been sitting all day and apparently puts too much pressure on my brain. But it's a real honor to be here today and talk about this. And as you listen, one of the things you can't help but hearing is a near evangelical fervor about public education. And there's a reason for that. Someone once said that education is a state's contribution to our nation's defense. In what way? It's our defense against ignorance.
Yeah.
What could possibly be more important? Sitting in Texas classrooms today is the future of the state of Texas. And it's going to be a different future, and there are different people now more than ever before, young people sitting in those classrooms, more of them of color, more of them qualifying for free and reduced price lunch, far more of them English as a second language, and all that stuff doesn't matter, because it is all human potential, and it is all of a great deal of value to the state of Texas. Keep in mind one thing. There is not one less bit capability in students in River Oaks than there is in another neighborhood around the city of Houston. Ability is distributed equally around our population. Opportunity is not. And it's education that closes that gap. And that's why it's critically important. It's why we've done some sort of things under Senator Taylor's leadership in public education. Under House Bill 5, we created the 5 tracks in school. That there's the academic track, the most strenuous one, of course, science, technology, and engineering, and math. And not the least rigorous, but the complete departure from that is a career and technical track we have now that we used to call vocational education. And there are now today in public schools so many different things in the 80 or 90 school districts I represent in the 31st district. Computer game design, culinary science, automobile mechanics, all those things, and each one carries with it the academic requirement to meet the demands of Texas essential knowledge and skills, so that students capable of going into the workplace with a certificate and still go to community college. We're looking at education, different paradigms of education than we ever have before, and I don't know how many of you think of it today, but UH Downtown occupies a leading position because used to be an awful lot of the students that are here today would work hard, provide for their families. If they didn't have an education, at that point, they wouldn't get it. But today they will, regardless of the age group or regardless of the vocation of that individual, because everybody can do better. Everybody can do more. And a lot of the key to that is education. So let me give you an example of Hereford High School up in the Panhandle. In a town where there are more beef cattle than there are people, which you can't educate, by the way. And they have a program in automobile mechanics. And so they go in the fall, somebody contributed a car, and they take it down to the very last nut and bolt, and by May, it has to be put together, and they have to drive it off, and there cannot be any spare parts sitting on the floor. And those young people are doing something they want to do. Let me give you another example. In River Road High School in Amarillo, the brand new build, not a brand new building, a newly renovated building for a cosmetology program. The day I was there were 20 young people. These were all girls, and they were involved in cosmetology program. The interesting thing there is every one of them was at risk, which means by the 8th or 9th grade they were expected to drop out. But there they were, juniors and seniors, doing their academic work and working in cosmetology. They were all going to graduate with a diploma and a certificate, and they were all in school. Bless the heart of the one young girl, she's about this tall, it could have been more than 15, and she's working away on this dummy who was not a member of the Texas Senate. And I walked up to her and I said, was there anything you could do to help me? And she just looked at me with this stricken look on her face, looked like she was going to cry. But the point is that education represents something very, very important to every individual. And that individual represents something very, very important to the rest of us. And for those of us who are concerned about the future of the state of Texas, the single most important thing, and a lot of my career has been spent in economic development, and Houston's been a hotbed for that. But of all the things that people look at when they come to a great city like Houston, first and foremost, workforce. Workforce. That's what's going to make the company of the future is the workforce. As Senator Taylor pointed out, about 20% of the jobs that will exist in 20 years, we don't know what they are. We just don't know. We know they will probably require some capability in technology or the use of technology, but we don't know what they are. And so one of the great roles of education is not just teaching people, but teaching people how to learn, realizing that by the time you're 50 years old, you may very well have to learn 2 or 3 different jobs. Hopefully everyone will represent greater opportunity for you and your family. One of the biggest issues that we will deal with in the coming legislative session that starts January 8th, of course, is the budget. Public school finance. That's 38% of the Texas budget. It's about 100, between public education and higher education, $110 billion a year. And that grows by about 70 or 80,000 kids in public schools a year. It's about 1.5 million individuals, not all young people, in colleges and universities. And that's our challenge. To see to it that by the year 2030, 60% of Texans have some sort of certificate or diploma. That's the building block of the future. And so all these things go to underscore just how important education is and how important it is to have good schools and good institutions and how to work at it. The answer is not always just money. Worst thing you can do from a governmental point of view is just throw money at problems. It's always this that creates the problem. It's not cold hard cash. Cash is not unimportant, but we have to keep our priorities. We see some of the most amazing things. One of the most successful school districts in the state of Texas is San Juan, Alumni, down in the valley. It is a poor school district. It is almost 100% Latino, and English as a second language is predominant, yet it's one of the most successful school districts in the state of Texas because they're creative and they're dedicated and they're open to new ideas. This is particularly true of education, where we're trying to educate a 21st century workforce with about a 19th century educational system. Do you know why? You know why he's in 3rd grade? Because he's 8. If he is capable of 5th grade work, why are we having him do 3rd grade work? There's no good reason. Here's the worst reason. And this isn't true in any endeavor, because that's the way we've always done it. And as Senator Taylor pointed out, it's a worst excuse for anything. So we have public schools that, what other endeavor that you're aware of, and I come from private businesses, the Senator Taylor, where you operate the business for 9.5 months, say, we're done, as good as we can do. That's why the South Koreans and the Finnish are so good at public education, because it's a year-round endeavor. Now, clearly that requires a sea change in a lot of areas and things like that, but we're far from being efficient in the way that we educate young people, the way that we employ teachers and things like that. Those are some of the issues that we have to deal with. A political statement, not a partisan statement. Mr. Barone, you sort of highlighted one of the fundamental challenges that we have in any area of policy in this state. I talk to groups all the time. I said, and it's certainly true of school boards, we have the government we deserve. It generally really agitates people and sometimes makes them really mad, but I'm a politician and I'm used to it. We have the government we deserve because of who we vote for, or who we don't vote for, or if we don't vote at all. Almost every single election in this country is determined by a minority of the population. And so we get exactly what we deserve. That's where we see fringe groups come on, because sometimes they're the most motivated group. How can any of us not be motivated by things like the education of our children and the value of our workforce, the way we educate those children? And yet, you know who's going to win the next election? You know who's going to win the election of 2024? How about 2030? No, I'm not a psychic. I'm sorry?
The one that gets the most votes.
Apathy. You're not wrong, but the answer is apathy. Apathy is a great candidate and appears to rule in almost every single election. I'm sorry, that's a terrible comment. It's the option we have in a free nation, but that's not a good candidate. Thank you for letting me be here today.
Questions for Senator Seliger?
I quieted him down.
No questions?
No, there's one question.
Please.
Raise your hands again.
Okay, you were talking, very shortly talked about other nations going school year-round. I have a very good friend. Quote from her from this weekend was, "We only teach 9 months because we're pushed so hard during those 9 months. We need 3 months off." She goes to work at 7 o'clock, comes home 5:30, does another 3 hours of working. On the weekends, that's what she does. She has been moved around from science to math. She's now teaching 2 different maths, and she's 28. How do you want to go to a year, maybe a year-round school or something like that? How are you going to treat the teachers better?
I'm not necessarily prescribing anything because I'm an educator, so I don't presume to tell you how you're going to run your school system. But if you're working year-round and you use shorter work blocks, or you weren't going to school as early or going late, the thing is, if the schools are not about the people that work there, they're about those children in the schools. What's best for that young mind, and to keep it exercised, curious and endeavoring. The way we have Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills with 394 of them, barely have time in 180 class days to get all those in. That system is flawed too, and we've tried to change it. The point is not to prescribe one specific fix to that, but to be thinking about how we can do it better. That's all. And we know the system we're using now, we talk about, whatever the shortcomings I point out or that you point out, is we know we can do better. But are you saying then that since this is always the way we've done it, that that's the way we need to do it in the future? Don't want to be careful about doing that.
Can I add one thing to that? Senator,
Please.
behind you. Technology today, there are games out there now, particularly these younger ages, that they can read and do math, and they're playing a game. And some of these games are a lot of fun and they're very creatively done. And the fact is, if you give a child a device to take home for whatever break there is, and you have a contest over the summer, or who has the most points, or who gets the most highest levels, you're going to have kids tricked into learning while they're playing a game. And once you do that, game over. We win. Because they're going to become educated, and they're not going to have that drop-off over the summer. It may actually go up over the summer with their math and their reading skills, things like that. Right now we have about 42% of our third graders read at third grade level. You know the importance of third grade reading for a child's future and education? This is one of the biggest determinants of how well they're going to do in their future education. Because up to third grade, you're learning to read. After third grade, you're reading to learn. So if you haven't gotten there, it's a real problem. So we can have these with technology, the 21st century, once again, we can do better. And it's not necessarily hiring more teachers and having kids all summer. It may just be about implementing more technological things that these kids are already used to anyway. They love it. So anyway, I just want to throw that in.
Yeah, let's talk about a tale of 2 school districts. Houston Independent School District and up in the Panhandle, Laz Buddy. Don't we all wish we could go to a school district, go to a school place called Laz Buddy? Houston has 320,000 students. I'm sorry? 215. Laz Buddy has 176. They don't have nearly the offerings in art and foreign languages and things like Houston ISD, and yet we have the same aspirations for those kids in the Panhandle as we do in Houston. How are we going to get there? Clearly, the classroom teacher is probably the single biggest answer there, but technology is going to close that opportunity gap in public. That's why Larry doesn't overemphasize the importance of technology. Have you all been in schools where they use smart boards now? Have you seen those smart boards work? What an innovation. You think, well, that's a gee whiz fancy deal. It's better than that. It can be a really good teaching aid. I've taken too much of AJ's time.
Thank you, Senator. I have another question back here.
I'm sorry?
I have another question. So I first want to add a comment. I do echo your sentiment, and I agree that people should be motivated to vote. The issue is that we find that in a lot of low-income schools, a lot of the parents are immigrants and they can't vote. So I would, appreciate it if we said, hey, it's okay to vote and be passionate about voting, but not make people that can't vote feel a little bad.
If they can't vote, they're not responsible for the government that we
They
have.
are responsible for their children, though.
And they do a good job of that. I'm talking about the responsibility of people who can vote to vote.
Well, thank you for that clarification. Now, my question was, you did a great lot of emphasis on the certification programs and the cosmetology, but I just read as of September 11th that the TEA was thinking about cutting that program in certain schools because apparently the salary wasn't good enough for the program. So a lot of people were saying, hey, what's happening? They're not including the tips in this. So TA is planning on cutting that. I don't know what's going on right now. I haven't really followed through with it, but I would like to be a little more informed on that.
Who do you think makes the rules in Austin? TEA or the legislature?
Legislature.
You're right. There will be a long discussion before they drop anything that is a worthwhile endeavor and vocation for young people. It is not for us to decide what your aspiration ought to be, but to see to it if we can educationally do what will allow you to reach your aspirations. Is it the highest paying thing? No, but all work, all honest work is honorable. And the marketplace will take care of itself. A lot of people say, I can't make much money in cosmetology, I won't go. Okay, go to another vocational program, and what will happen is demand will take care of it then. Thanks, good question.
All right, back here, one more question, then we want to go to Mr. Krieger.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you guys first for being here. So right now, through the University of Houston downtown, I have the privilege of working with Luskin Elementary School, which is one of the Achieve 1A schools on the near north side. And I'm really noticing something that I've noticed for a couple of years, because I have a number of teachers in my family who work in HISD, and they always tell me about the lack of the programming in their schools, the middle schools, all the way up to the high school, elementary school. So first I wanted to ask, what was the school that you mentioned during your speech? And then secondly, what were the programs that they instituted to kind of create like a bounce back environment, to make them the most successful district? Because a lot of the teachers that I speak with, even the administrators, they're spread very thin. They work in the office or they teach. Some counselors are forced to do administrative work because there's not enough staff. So they don't have the time necessarily to try to identify what ancillary programs might benefit the students the best. So is there ever any opportunity for the state to, the same way that we standardize testing expectations, to standardize programs across the school districts across the state, so that the people in the Panhandle and the people in HISD can aspire to the same thing, and then you can let the market kind of try to jump in to fill for each school.
When it comes to standardization, and the way we do with utilization of Texas essential knowledge and skills, because all these young people have to be taught the same thing academically. When it comes to career and technical things, we allow school districts a huge amount of leeway to teach the things that their local industry need and want and what their young people want. If you're talking about Far San Juan Alamo, I don't know what programs, in this case, his name is Dr. King, has implemented, but it's to emphasize resources in the classroom. That's where rubber meets the road, if you will. There's a reasonably new superintendent in Midland by the name of Orlando Riddick. And he recently said, and this is important, He has never seen a failing school where parents are engaged, ever. If you ask superintendents around the state, the one thing that they could use the most of them won't tell you money. They'll tell you it's parents.
A lot of the parents, like in my school district, which the school that I'm working at as a wraparound service intern.
Right.
They don't even, they can't engage because we're struggling to teach and educate and even try to buy their time, so that they can be a part of that,
I don't mean to be particularly facile with it, because think about a single parent family, a parent has to work 2 or 3 jobs.
Right.
That parent is not there to sit at the dinner table, clear the dishes, and say, now we're going to do homework. And we're going to make you put down the cell phone and step away from the computer, and we're going to work on history and math. I realize that limitation doesn't exist. I'm simply pointing out what the challenge is for educators. It's a tough job. But I think educators will tell you, as a general rule, their best students are the ones whose families help drive them. And then you find those extraordinary students. And it's unusual, because it takes a tremendous amount of motivation and discipline, kind of hard sometimes to find in 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and 14s. And when you do find it, incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, Mr. Crable, tell us from your vantage point, the issues that you're dealing with. What are the top issues that you're dealing with from your vantage point here in the state of Texas?
Well, first, besides these ones, first I just want to say thank you, University of Houston Downtown, for hosting us and bringing me together with my colleagues from the mayor's office and my bosses from the Senate. I want to answer that in 2 parts briefly, but then I really just want to open the floor for questions. The number one concern on my heart when we think about how do we improve the quality of education for children across Texas is always a question of how do we best support, prepare, attract, and retain really great professionals in the classrooms. That's where it begins, that's where it ends. Everything else exists in support of that relationship between the learner and the educator. And so the strategies that we're focusing on at the agency are really geared toward how do we cause that to be as high quality of an interaction or relationship as it possibly be. And in terms of what are some of the big picture issues that we're looking at as an agency, you've already heard about a lot of them. We're deeply concerned about issues around safety. Our children have to be safe before they can be educated. There are legitimate funding considerations that we're talking about, and we're looking at what are lessons learned from places around the state where they've been innovative with how they've deployed limited resources to get increased outcomes for students. And then, probably if I had to list one more thing, it'd probably be early learning. The best way to avoid having to remediate is to educate before you have a problem emerge. And so trying to find ways within existing constraints to increase children's access to pre-K, we think is a really important lever to pull on to improve education of children across the state. I'll stop there. I know you all have questions. Let's get after it. What do you got for me?
Question.
Yeah.
Well, I could go over there and hand you mine, but I like to see you running across.
Excellent. Thank you all again. damonBARONE. I have a question that concerns governance. We talked a lot about when things are going right, but unfortunately when things are not going right, those are the times that people need help. It's kind of like you never realize how much insurance you don't have until you get into an accident. So my concern is that when the administration, for example, the district that I live in, the HR administration doesn't have experience. They have one individual that has HR experience, and they're not a director there. So that causes issues and concerns there. So then when the school board does not govern or refuses to govern or passes over their governance power, that compounds the problem. Then when the parent or the community gets to the Texas Education Agency, all of a sudden the parent or the community is expected to held to a higher standard as if they have a bar or a legal degree. They must cite education codes. They must cite policies and procedures. So my concern is, what mechanisms are put in place? We talked about the community being socially and economically challenged. We talked about the community being English as a second language, and we tout on that when we educate them. However, we don't understand that we also abuse those powers, or that we abuse those positions when it's time for them to work on governance, or work on their grievances, or work on their concerns. So my concern is that, why are these same people that we're talking about held to the same standard as an organization that has experience with those governing issues and those policies? When they get to TEA, now you expect them to quote policies and procedures, quote education code of ethics. Who's there really, truly for the people? That's my question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so part of the question I hear asked is, this is fundamentally about the accessibility of our government. Our government doesn't exist to serve itself, it exists to serve us. And there have to be processes and procedures in place to facilitate that. One of the things that we've changed in my time at the agency to try to make that happen, first we want to be more transparent in a lot of our processes and procedures at the agency, and so we've been more intentional about posting those online, making those more accessible, more available, so that people can actually know what the processes are, so it's not hidden, it's not obfuscated. But some of the other things we've done is we've gone back and we've reimagined some of the processes that we do have in place, and trying to identify, where can we streamline this? Where can we make this more accessible? Where can we make this easier? There are a lot of school districts out there, and unfortunately there's not an unlimited number of staff at the agency. And so you're always trying to find a way to balance between how do we serve the entire state as effectively as possible, with the limited resources that we have available. So I would definitely submit to you, we're never going to get that. We're never going to be perfect at that. There's always going to be this gap. The only solution to that is to have this unlimited behemoth of government. And that's really a non-answer as well. And so there's always going to be this tension. What there is for us to do as public servants is to constantly look for, how can we optimize, how can we make government more transparent, how can we make government more accessible. Thinking of, recently I was visiting with my staff who do a lot of our complaints management work, and my question for them was, what are we doing to make sure that anybody across the state, if they have concerns about their school district, that they can access us? We receive complaints that are faxed in, we receive complaints that are hand-delivered on scraps of paper, we receive complaints that are emailed in, we can receive complaints in a wide variety of languages. We received a complaint that was delivered to us in Braille. And we will do whatever it takes to make sure that the concerns that folks have, that we're going to open ourselves up to receiving those, and then putting those through the process that is fair and equitable. But again, to your point, are we ever perfect at that? Have we ever arrived? No. This is always a journey. And your task is to hold us responsible for keeping our foot on the gas on that journey, and not slacking off.
Would you talk a little bit about what you do with poor performers? Some of the things that you can do with poor performing districts?
Yeah, so the question from the dais is, what are some of the things that the legislature has really challenged the agency to do as it relates to when there is underperformance? There are a few different categories that we look at for underperformance. We look statutory, did they follow all the laws? A common law that people run up against is, did they have all the people fingerprinted? This is a health and safety issue for our students, right? But that's a statutory question. We also have financial questions. Have they demonstrated that they are operating in good faith as fiduciaries for taxpayer resources? We also look at governance. To what extent is the board governing effectively? And then finally, the area that we really look at is, academically. This is where the majority of the agency's resources are deployed. Is to what extent are students actually learning and getting access to the promise of public education to the degree they deserve? What the legislature has put in place is this A through F system, and says we have to have a way of identifying relative levels of quality in terms of how well is a student performing or how well is the school performing. And I said or intentionally because in our system it is an either or. This can't just be, to Senator Taylor's point, about what is happening in that zip code. Is it a wealthy zip code? the zip code where families are struggling more. It has to be a conversation about how well are students doing, or how well are we doing at causing growth in those students? How well is the school doing at really challenging and growing students year over year? And so when a school system is underperforming on both of those measures, because in order to get a low-performing grade overall, you have to be underperforming on both of those, not just one, but both. When that happens, the statute the legislature's put in place, a lot of Houstonians probably know by heart, the numbers are 1842, House Bill 1842, that essentially says, if you allow the children in a particular community to suffer for 5 years in a row, then you have created a circumstance where the rest of us as Texans have an obligation to step in and see to the well-being of those children. Now, that is a bold and a harsh statement. It's bold because, to Senator Taylor's point, it used to be almost indefinite underperformance was allowable under statute, and they've changed that. But it's also necessary, because as Senator Seliger describes, if we don't do this well, we're snatching from children the promise. And so even though we lift up this idea of independent school districts, there has to be a limit. There has to be a point where if, for whatever reason, we haven't met the needs of our students, that there has to be a conversation about how do we make it right for those kids? How do we not allow them to suffer for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years? And so that's what the statute describes, is that the agency is obligated, when children have been underserved for 5 years consecutively, that the agency is obligated by the legislature to intercede and to see toward the educational well-being of those students. This is an important conversation for us to have. And there are passionate ideas on all sides of this. If you haven't seen passion on the stage, you haven't been paying attention. There's a reason people care about this, because this is some of the stuff that matters most. How do we care for? How do we attend to the needs of our students? And so, yes, this is going to challenge people as the state rolls this out. There are going to be people who don't enjoy the direction that the legislature has sent the agency, but the underlying reason behind those actions is that there has to be a point where we have to say, right is right. And when children aren't getting that after a certain point, the rest of Texans have a collective obligation to those children and have to step forward. And there is now empowering legislation in the form of Bill 1842 that not only suggests that, but the 5-year mark obligates that. I saw your hand go up.
You don't think that 5 years are still a little bit too long? And I say that only because it takes so long to break a habit that's been formed. So, you don't think that stepping in sooner would, correctify that, Because to me, I feel like if you wait 5 years, you can correct that. Because if they're ESL, there's that 90 to 10, the 80 to 20, that 60 to, that has been ruined. So if they've been getting nothing but strictly Spanish, that entire time without those 5 years, because they're supposed to come out of that program at a certain, extent, what good does that do them? You can't rectify that. It's ruined.
Yeah,
to be honest, it's ruined. So how do you fix that?
Yeah, this is a great point. And so there has to be some variability in the law that allows for the judgment of professionals to be expressed. And so the way that the legislature wrote that with the statute is that as schools slide into underperformance, as they fall into that D and F range in their first and second year, there's an obligation that they submit a plan of action to the agency that says, this is what we're going to do to get right for these children. But the law now allows for if the commissioner looks at that planning and determines that the district isn't really taking its obligations to these children seriously, the agency has the ability to intercede at year 2, 3, and 4. I'll be honest with you, that it would take considerable underperformance on the part of the district for the agency to step in, so it's not something that we think of lightly, but it is an authority the commissioner takes seriously and is willing to deploy if that circumstance demands it. However, the statute mandates action at 5 years. So at year 2, it becomes an option if it is just really clear that we have to move in now, that things are so bad for our children that we really have to intercede now. But statute mandates at 5 years. Yes, sir.
Bless you.
Thank you all for coming here. I'm Ron Beebe. I'm a professor of educational research here at University of Houston downtown. You all touched on, and you, Mr. Krill, specifically talked about early childhood education. Senator, you talked about the thing by 3rd grade. There are numerous studies that show that for every dollar spent in providing quality early childhood education, communities reap anywhere between $8 and $22 on the backside of that, depending on who did the study and what they configured. A few years back, we had a proposition here in Houston to put a penny tax to provide support. We couldn't get that passed. Governor Abbott ran last year on a platform that said we need to provide pre-K to the state of Texas. That didn't pass. What can we do in this state to make the investment in early childhood that's going to take care of the 3rd grade reading problem? It's not going to be a problem at 3rd grade because it's addressed at early childhood. Research also indicates that quality early childhood care provides solid foundation for students who are considered at risk, right? So, I mean, it seems to me that would be a very good investment of time and effort in order to really improve the educational outcome of our students here in Texas.
Would you talk about what we did do?
Yeah,
Either one of you all?
Yeah, Governor Abbott had the initiative, and we did pass it in 2015. And it was for high-quality pre-K. And you realize we're already spending $1 billion plus or whatever, don't quote me on the numbers. But we're spending several $1 billion on pre-K. So the discussion last session was, okay, we've got this money for high-quality pre-K, what is everything else? And why are we spending money on something that's not really quality pre-K? So the idea was, let's reinforce the high-quality pre-K, because you can have kids just sitting around doing nothing, and that's not really helping the kid. But high quality, you have a good instructor with good curriculum, where they're actually, they're still having fun, but they're learning. Another thing I'll just tell you real quick on that issue that you're addressing, the Public School Finance Commission is recognizing as well, and it's a matter of reallocating some dollars that are already in the system in places, for example, high school allotment. Okay, we did that a few years ago to help on some other form of thing, but really, the money, we're spending more money on career tech and those types of things, but some of that money could be reallocated towards early pre-K type stuff. But it's not just pre-K, because you know about the drop-off as well. If you just have high-quality pre-K and then it drops off in 1st, 2nd grade, that doesn't help either. In fact, there is a drop-off. The kids will show up better prepared, and then by the time they're in 3rd grade, it's dropped back to almost close to where everybody else is. So it's a follow-through. It starts with pre-K, getting them prepared for it, but then you got to follow through. You got to have quality education. We've heard stories of schools hiring their best teachers to put them in 3rd grade because that's the year we test. I'm sorry, that's too late. That's a bad strategy. You don't teach a kid in 1 year all those things. You teach some kids in 1 year. And self-paced, or some kids can do certain stuff. But generally, you're not going to take a child that's not reading grade level in 2nd grade, and all of a sudden they're reading 3rd. If they're not reading grade level, I said, no, you just make it 1 year. So,
and here's what we're finding more and more, is that school districts are taking it upon themselves to implement pre-K and things like that. I was just in an elementary school in an early childhood academy earlier this week, and they have a dedicated facility. This is not a wealthy school district. A dedicated facility goes all the way from pre-K to 2 or 3, includes Head Start. And then it becomes a basic appropriation question. Since school districts are willing to do it, and I think that you want to do it, then it becomes a question of just basic formula. Having the money there in formula distributed to all school districts, so all SHIPs, in this case, early childhood SHIPs, are raised all over the state of Texas. But I think that is very rapidly becoming a real priority.
So, and the question of, making sure that it's full day pre-K, which would be fantastic, because HISD, gets the half-day pay and then put in its own dollars to pay for the full day pre-K. But, the other question is, there's so many of these early childhood centers, that are serving the 0 to 3, and many of them are private. And so it's outside of the public system, and yet these dollars are coming from the Texas Workforce Commission. And then you don't necessarily have a lot of synergy in terms of the collection and the sharing of information between different agencies. And oftentimes when I talk to folks, I'm like, yeah, do you know that the child care subsidy comes from the Texas Workforce Commission? Many people are not aware of that. And so there needs to be, and I know that there is a push towards that in getting the different agencies to work more closely with one another. Also, the utilization of scholarships in the area of pre-K is something that is oftentimes entertained, or also the opportunity of being able to utilize teachers from the K through 12 system creatively in the early child center space. And that's something that's just a really creative approach of being able to just have synergy in educational opportunities.
If I could add just one more thing on the overall funding that we're talking about in School of Finance. Another thing we found through our discussions is the intensity of the population. You know, if you have 10% of your population is low income, qualifies for free reduced lunch, that's a whole different scenario than somebody who's at 80 and 90%. And so we're recommending adjusting the formula of funding. One, we're bumping it from 1.2 to 1.22, all the way up to 1.26 or something. But you get more based on the intensity of the poverty, because it's a much more dire situation. And you know, generally, if you have somebody that's at a 10% low income, well, they see opportunities all around them. They're experiencing. But if you're surrounded with 80, 90% low income, you don't see those opportunities. You don't even know there's a different world out there. It's an intensity there that we're going to recognize in our updated formulas to make sure we allocate dollars to where the need is the greatest, to make sure we take care of this portion of our population that frankly we've not been doing a great job on.
Okay, it is 10 minutes after 7, so we are a little bit running over time. I want to give an opportunity for someone who has not asked a question. Does anyone would like to ask a final question? All right.
Oh, get that guy.
We have,
Get the little guy.
we got a question.
You have a question?
He was like, let's get out of here.
What grade is he in?
What grade? What's your name?
Cameron.
Cameron, who's your favorite teacher?
My favorite teacher is Miss Murphy.
All right, let's hear from Ms. Murphy.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Tamia Pia, and I'm a senior at Cy Falls and Alief ISD. And this year we just implemented this new policy. All of you kind of touched on safety, and we made this new clear backpack policy. And I just wanted to know your thoughts and opinions on that. Because me personally as a student and my fellow students, we've conversed about it in some of our classes, that a clear backpack just kind of seems like a Band-Aid or like a quick fix saying, hey, we're doing something, but it's not really that effective in safety in our opinion. So I just wanted to know all of your thoughts on it.
You're right. It is a Band-Aid. It's intended to be a Band-Aid. It is a Band-Aid. Is it the answer to school security? No. That's why you have to have a clear person go in the NRG Stadium on a Sunday. It's just one of those things they can see. There's so much more, and Senator Taylor touched upon it, how to harden school districts. I think in the end it's going to be human security, resource officers, and things like that. In a lot of areas they're talking about school teachers not necessarily being armed but having access to firearms. And my feeling is it's up to the local school district responding to local voters to do what they think will make schools safe. And so, yeah, but a lot of Band-Aids over a while will cover a pretty substantial wound.
I think there's such a strong need for more counselors and for psychosocial emotional supports for children that are demonstrating signs and symptoms of stress, trauma, post-traumatic stress, to be able to receive appropriate referrals, but also follow-up and being able to engage the parents and the students. Also to destigmatize access and the importance of mental health is something that's just extraordinarily critical. I had an opportunity to meet with folks from Microsoft, and they were talking about developing like a clicker button system to be able to have teachers have these types of systems available in the class. But I told them, I said, is there some way you could develop some type of technology for us to be able to try to get a gauge of how the children are feeling and what they're going through? I know that Adi Barkawi with Unitas has something that's comparable in terms of a gauging system of trying to see where young people are at. But we really need to be able to follow up in terms of the mental health and well-being of our students.
Well, thank you all. Let's give our see the passion, I hope, from the panelists here. We need that from you. We need you to be engaged in your work, and there's a lot of urban education students in this room. We need you to be passionately interested, because that's the only way people are going to make a change. I think that the most salient thing that was said tonight was the comment about apathy. When people do nothing, oh, they're going to do it. They're going to take care of it. I elected somebody. They're going to take it. Oh, the principal's got it. The dean's got it. Oh yeah, that's my teacher's. No, we have to participate. It's a democracy. We have to get involved, and not just by complaining. We got to do. We have to be engaged in the process.
In 2015, of the registered voters of the ages of 18 to 24, in 2015, of the registered voters in the area that were 18 to 24-year-olds, how many young people came out and voted? What was the number of the registered voters that came out in that very important race?
5%?
It was 7%. But on the other side of the spectrum, the vast majority of voters in that election that came out were over the age of 65. So the student voice and the young person's voice is absolutely critical. If you want, I won my first election with 42 votes. So, I mean, just please know that every single vote counts. And if you're a person that can't vote yet, make sure you're out there block walking for the right candidates and supporting folks that you believe and you know will protect your family, your nannies, your granddads, your uncles, your family, and your community. Because every single person, regardless of status, has a right to a wonderful public quality school education and a right to participate in democracy.
I mean, you heard it said from Mr. Craver, they're taking all the different complaints and whatever form they're coming at, they're taking them and they're trying to do their best to respond to them. But somebody's got to make a decision about those complaints.
Yeah.
Who's going to make that decision if it's not you? If you're not involved in the process, somebody's going to make those decisions. Why not you? Why not you getting involved? And there's a myriad of ways that you can get involved. We need to get involved. We need to get involved. It's our lives. It's our future. That's what this country is all about. We have to get engaged in the process. So I want to end by bringing up our dean, Dean Van Horn, if you would mind coming up. So this series is the brainchild of Dean Van Horn. She thought it up, Vital Voices, and then she thought up the Vital Alumni, bringing people back to the college. But it was her idea, her creativity, that created this series to bring people whose lives and whose work impact the public service. That's what we're about, whether it's criminal justice, social work, urban education, right? It is people who are involved in the public good. So I wanted to bring the dean up to thank you for that, and then we wanted to give our guests a little something, but before we do that, we thought you might want to say something.
Well, I had my hand up a minute ago because I just want to clarify, first of all, thank you. This is beyond my wildest dreams. Years ago, I told Stephen I went to an imprint event in Houston. I love those. And I brought him the flyer. I said, I want to do something like this, and I like the way it's one word. And that's really how it happened. So we work as a team in the College of Public Service, and we begin a year ahead brainstorming, who can we bring in? What would be important topics? And that's how Vital Voices began, really, and that's how it's going to be sustained. It's super important to us to bring you this kind of programming. What happened with Vital Alumni is we started seeing our students out there doing amazing things, and we said, let's bring them back, because there's nothing more inspiring than seeing somebody you probably went to class with out there doing something amazing. And so that's been very exciting. We just started out, last year? We only had a few. So I want to hear your ideas about what kind of things you want to hear. This was tremendous, the attendance here, the passion. I did want to clarify for our leaders up front. It's not that we don't have internships, because we do. They're just not paid. We have 720 hours of internship that is required part of our degree program in urban education spent in schools. And We have a much higher rate of our graduates going back into the communities they came from and staying in teaching more than twice as long as most people do, so a high retention in the field. So education is going to be in some good hands. In criminal justice, we have internships now for anyone who's not already in the Peace Force. And in social work, we have 440 hours of required internship within the program in agencies, most recently innovating in social work in what we call Spanish track. Okay, we're going to have to talk, because that's the idea. We found out there were many, many agencies in Houston trying to do social work, and no one in there spoke Spanish. So you're trying to address a population in crisis, and people can't even communicate. So we spent some of our initiative money to hire people to intern, supervise our students in Spanish-speaking agencies, and they now have 2 in every agency, right? That's our student intern and the person we're paying to supervise them.
Let us know how we can provide funds to have some paid internships.
Wow, this is great. Okay, well, there'll be some follow-up for tonight. But needless to say, am I proud and passionate to stand beside these individuals? Yes. Am I proud to serve you? You betcha, because you are one heck of an amazing group of people. So thank you very much, and let us give some gifts. Each person, this is specially designed for the series. I know on the second floor you see these. Go down the hall and see the series. This will stay in our building forever, and we will give each one of you one of these. This is specially designed by an individual in our college, Paulina Gamino, right?
Yep.
And so thanks to her and thanks to you. We hope you'll put this proudly in your office and remember your time with us. It is kind of beautiful, isn't it? Mr. Milano framed them himself. So we just want you to remember us, because we are certainly going to remember you. Right, folks? Thanks.
And finally, I just want to say that President Munoz wanted to extend his best wishes to everyone. He had to leave for another engagement, but he was very honored to have been part of this panel. So thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you so much.
Just very